And so the topic that we're going to be launching into now is international FCAB. And there's been so much development in this area, from new publications, books, brand new conferences that are going to be taking FCAB into new directions and new places. And we're really fortunate today to hear from two experts from different regions of the world who are both going to speak about FCAB in Asia and the Pacific, and then in Africa, but also reflect as we come together and think about what this means for the audience and what it means for FCAB, in a domestically. So we have a short amount of time, but I think we're going to learn a lot. We'll be first hearing from Jin Huang from St. Louis University, and followed by David Ansong at UNC Chapel Hill. You can read their bios in the program. I'm not going to spend our precious time with their long list of accomplishments, but both speakers have decades of experience really at working at multiple levels: research, policy, practice, and education. And so I'll turn it over to you, Jen, and we're looking forward to hearing from both of you.
Thank you, David, for the great introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm very grateful to participate in this session to discuss the FCAB development in a global context. And Dr. Ansong will focus on FCAB initiative in Africa. So I will briefly summarize the recent development in Asia, particularly in mainland China. So I'm more familiar with the FCAB development in mainland China. And I'm going to share several slides with you guys together on these two topics. Okay. Yes. Okay, so working with our Asian colleagues together, we have seen a rapid development of FCAB in the social work and the human service professions in many Asian countries and the regions. So for example, social work colleagues at National Singapore University collaborate with Center for Social Development here and implement a FCAB curriculum in social work education. Margaret Schraden is the leading researcher on this important topic. And we have a variety of asset building policies and programs for different populations, and mainly for children, like child development accounts and child savings accounts in Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore. So for example, Dr. Jiang and Dr. Yoon presented an emergency savings program among young workers in Korea in one research session. And I also know that social work educators in Taiwan, they also visit University of Maryland several years ago and learn from Judy and Chris programs and establish a FCAB Center on social work continuing education. So there are a lot of FCAB activities going on in Asia now. I think one large common background for these increasing needs of the FCAB education, research, and practice is the financialization and the digitalization. So just like what we heard from this morning about fintech, technology development. So I believe this is also the case in Africa, and David will also cover this maybe. So this trend will create new opportunities for us and also generate risks and challenges on individual and families' financial security and financial development. So in last several years, when we work with our colleagues in Asia, trying to promote FCAB in social work, we actually follow a similar strategy, which was originally developed at CSD. So we try to initiate FCAB in social work education first, and then expand this idea, expand FCAB practice into the social work practice field. So that's kind of the strategy we have been used in different Asian countries and regions. So using mainland China as an example, in the last several years, after we introduced the FCAB idea to China, our Chinese colleagues are very excited about FCAB concept. And for example, the China Council on Social Work Education creates a Financial Social Work Commission last November, which includes about 16 social work education programs as organizational members. So this commission has the responsibility to support the development of FCAB in social work education, such as curriculum and course development and teaching material support. And this commission will also be in charge of hosting an annual FCAB conference. So I think this is a great and formal structure to support FCAB education. Now, in addition to this commission, our social work colleagues at China Central University of Finance and Economics have organized and host a FCAB network, including about 300 social work educators, researchers, practitioners, and students to communicate with each other and learn from each other on FCAB related topics. 2 social work educational programs have created FCAB and financial social work concentration in their BSW programs. And one has initiated last year a MSW FCAB concentration. So the program actually recruited a cohort of 8 to 10 MSW students, and all of them have selected FCAB as their major MSW concentration, among others. So in addition, our Chinese colleagues at Central University of Finance and Economics have translated the 2018 FCAB textbook written by Margaret Schraden, Julie Birkenmeyer, and Michael Collins. The book will be published in September this year. I think that's a great start point to develop their own FCAB teaching curriculum and materials. So in terms of practice, following the step of China CSWE, China National Social Work Association is in preparation to initiate a FCAB commission. So they plan to do that this year, and think that's going to be a very important to improve frontline social work practitioners' FCAB competencies. Last year, we worked with one local organization in China to initiate a local FCAB training programs for social workers. So working with local financial regulation bureau, this initiative provides financial FCAB education, FCAB training and education to social workers in 2 large districts, which serve about 1 million residents in the community. So that's a very large population. And also led by a professor at Beijing City University, Professor Lin Zhou, China National Social Work Association, so NASW in China, it collaborates with the Central Bank of China to create the first online FCAB training for human service practitioners. So I delivered the first training session last month, and it's very exciting. We recruit more than 800 frontline social work practitioners just in 1 week. So next, we will follow up with our local service organizations to further conduct a face-to-face FCAB training in 4 large cities. So we also see quite some new FCAB practice innovations in mainland China. So for example, Dr. Deng at Peking University, who has piloted several CDA child development accounts in several counties. And Dr. Zhou, I mentioned before, she's organizing the national level FCAB education for social work practitioners, has been working on creating a technology-based universal microfinance platform for low-income children with developmental disabilities. And here you can also see some research products we developed in last several years. So from 2018 to 2020, There were 4 FCAB conferences hosted by social work educators and researchers. And Chinese social work educators and researchers have published 5 special FCAB sessions in social work magazines and journals to disseminate these ideas. One FCAB research center has been established by Shanghai Business College Department of Social Work. And in addition, a new edited FCAB book will be published this year in Chinese. And we also have a new journal which has a designated session on FCAB and financial social work. So you can see we have a lot of activities and projects going on in last several years. I think I kind of provide a lot of activities and updates on the projects. I think the most important development is that FCAB vision has been created among social work educators and practitioners, and a structure now it's in place to further support the FCAB development in China. So next, I think our Chinese colleagues would like to further strengthen the FCAB structure, provide more education and trainings to social work faculty and educators, and also try to explore new FCAB policies and practice models. Okay, I think this is a brief summary of FCAB development and our activities and projects in mainland China and Asia. Thank you. David.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Can you all hear me clearly, right? Good. It's nice to be here. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces. So I will rush through this very quickly so we can reserve time for discussions. So what I'll say is that FCAB related work has been happening on the continent for a long time. We've had projects like Youth Safe, Assets Africa. So we've done all of these projects for years. We've learned quite a bit, and so we bring a lot of that experience to FCAB Africa. The focus now is a lot different with FCAB Africa. We're looking at a little more training, and you've heard a lot from Jane about how that's working out in Asia. So we're learning from what we've already done in Africa and Asia and the US as well. So in the case of Africa, can you go to the next? I think there is a red, next slide, yes. So here's our vision. No, I'm sorry, same one. I just wanted to show those 2 boxes. So the vision for the Africa project is really to tie whatever we are doing to the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you're familiar with development on the continent, you notice that almost all the governments sort of align their development strategy with the Sustainable Development Goals, which is what the UN is promoting. And so we also want to go same round because we want buy-in and we want this to make sense on the ground. And so this is what we are thinking, that if we go in at 2 levels, right? So we have financial capability where there's a lot of training, there will be some engagement with the fintech industry as well. And then at the same time, we have a lot of engagement with the institutional sector, both the formal and informal. Then ultimately we achieve 2 things, financial stability and security. And hopefully that ultimately leads to the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, there are a lot of players involved. At the global level, we have CSD working with UNC on this project, but we try to run this almost like a franchise where in each country, we have local leadership and they tailor everything to their local needs. We will still want to provide that overall leadership, but then we want them to really lead this effort. And so that's how we are proceeding. Go to the next slide. So we have broadly 2 strategies. The first is more or less a trainer programs. And we want to train human service professionals. I know in Jane's presentation talked a lot about social workers. And so that's how we went in, and through our initial stakeholder engagement, realized we needed to broaden it a little bit more to look at just human service professionals in general. And so you see here, even in the list, we have the clergy and the teachers, right? So for instance, in Sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of development revolve around churches, so they're heavily involved. And so we casted the net very broadly. And as we work with stakeholders on the ground, we have heavy policy engagement effort. We want ultimately everything that we do to be mainstream. And to do that, we have to engage policymakers right from the outset. And so that's the main agenda. And then there is the second piece, which is more like a follow-up. We're hoping that in a couple of years after we are really sure about how Agenda 1 has worked, then we work with the fintech industry, so the financial technology industries, to build onto their platform some financial development programs. So we know fintech is really driving financial inclusion on the continent, and there's no way you can do FCAB, without looking at that industry. So they are a strong driver, and so I think we will be leveraging that. There will still be a lot of policy engagement on that side as well. So one of the things we've done, next slide, is create this sort of partnership model where we bring in several stakeholders in each country, and we put them in these 4 buckets, right? So we have the universities and then the nonprofits. So we want the training to happen through the universities, so social work programs and other human service programs. But then one of the feedback we've received is, well, they feel it's still too top down, right? And so you're training faculty members to then train students, and then they go out to use it. And so that's fantastic, but for some of them, they think it's too top down. It might take too long to get to our ultimate group of interest. And so we will be working with nonprofit agencies who are directly working with vulnerable groups. So they receive training and then they directly engage with these groups. And then on the policy side, we involving the financial sector actors. So they will help with the development of the curriculum, but then also lead the policy engagement efforts. And then we have the research side. We want research to drive all of this. There's a lot of excitement about it, and people want to try all kinds of things, but we want this to ultimately be evidence-based and also make sure there is some learning happening. So in each country, we have a research institution that will lead the effort. We will still provide global leadership on that. Next slide. So far we've, this is an ambitious agenda. We hoping to target the entire continent. We think we can get there eventually, but we're trying to start small. So we've onboarded 6 countries so far. The most recent is Liberia. And so all that I described, the partnership model, the agenda and all of that, it's all happening in each of these countries, and they are tailoring it to their own unique needs. But what's going to happen in the next year or so? We've started, so this all started about a year ago. We've ramped up our engagement in the last 6 months. We're going to do a lot more onboarding of partners. There are a lot more partners that we could bring on board, but they will all fit into those 4 buckets that I talked about earlier. There's also some surveys that we're developing to get a sense of what the needs are. We do have some ideas, but we want to make sure it is consistent with what people think is happening on the ground. And then we'll have the official launch this July. So there is the ICSD conference happening in South Africa. It's now going to be virtual, but there'll be a launch where we bring all the stakeholders together and say, this is where we are, how do we move forward? We also review the survey results at that conference. The other piece we want to talk about is capacity building. So we definitely see this as a capacity building project, but there's also strong interest in that, especially research capacity on the ground. And so we want to highlight that as a critical piece of this work. And so we'll be working with research partners and a lot of the departments of social work to build a capacity to really evaluate this work. So this what's happened so far on the ground. It's a very exciting project, a lot of energies on the ground. We're treading cautiously. There's a lot of challenges coordinating all these key players, but so far it's going well, and we've had great leadership from CSD, and so I think we're in good hands. I think that's all I have, right? Is there another slide? I think that's it. Yes.
Okay, Dr. Wong, Dr. Ansang, thank you so much. You've given us a lot to think about. I was going to ask if someone could put the link to the ICSD conference, there we go, to the chat. And maybe David, when you get a chance, maybe you can say a little bit more about that. So for both of you, as you talked, you know, I just want to first say there's so much to celebrate in the progress that has been made in a really short amount of time. And of course, it's been, you are part of teams that are large and have done a lot of people working on these things, but the scale and the magnitude of what's been accomplished is impressive and should be celebrated. And I encourage the audience and participants to pose questions if they have them. But I'll kind of get us started here. I think what's unique about both of you is that you have, from your vantage point, you're experts in these regions, and you've participated in the development of FCAB in those places. But you're also experts in FCAB theory, evidence, research, practice here in the US. You know, having gone to school here, working here, and having published numerous papers and projects studying FCAB here. And so, I don't know, maybe from a macro perspective, looking at both contexts, you know, what do you see has you know, allowed this progress to happen, and what would be the implications for the audience here today?
David, that's a great question. So I can talk about some of my thoughts and see whether Dr. Armstrong has additional thing to add. So I think one very important piece here is that when I see the FCAB development in Asia and in China, and I also mentioned that in our slides that the social workers in China and in Asia, they really see the needs from their clients. And as a whole society, we need to move on to the universal financial security and financial inclusion. So they see a great needs from their clients to achieve financial well-being and financial inclusion. So for example, in China, because the development of financialization and digitalization, now we can access to a lot of financial technology and also new financial services. But we see a lot of challenges for disadvantaged populations to use these services, to take advantage of these services. So for example, in China, we see quite some problems in terms of financial protection and the consumer debt among older adults and young college students. So a lot of social workers, they see these kind of challenges day to day in their, when they interact with their clients. So I think that's one important factor here. And the other thing is that I think when I work with our colleagues in China, they really see this as the important vision of social work education, now social work profession and social workers. So promote financial well-being, financial inclusion, and the financial security. It's a very important vision of the social work profession. I think they embrace this vision and really think social work practitioners have important role in this process.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I can add very quickly two things. One is our strategy to tie to the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, because we know that's what everyone is talking about on the continent, right? And so if it's what we're pursuing is different, then it's much harder to make a case for it. And so throughout our meetings, when we show that slide that shows the connection to those goals, then people get it, and we don't even have to say a lot for them to see the point. And then the other thing is also building on existing infrastructure. So like I said, we've done FCAB related work in the past. The difference here is this time we're building on systems that already exist. So going through schools of social work or departments of social work that already exist. You already have curriculum, everything set up. That I think is a huge plus. And it also allows for scaling. And the other piece we really try hard to achieve is have the policymakers on board right from the outset. So the way we've done other projects, we finish at the engagement stage, the communication of results, that's when we bring in policymakers. And this time we try and include them from the outset to help set the agenda. That we think is an easier way to mainstream everything that comes out of this work.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there. Please correct me if I'm wrong, if there's any questions in the chat. But I do have another one to keep us going. So, one of the challenges in American social work, or in North American social work, it is trying to get FCAB into the curriculum. It's kind of like you're competing against other established traditions in the field, and so how, I guess it might be relevant to other participants. How have you been able to have success so quickly at getting FCAB into the social work curriculum in your respective areas?
Thank you, David, for this great observation and for this question. So I can try to talk about my experiences in China first. And I think the social work education and social work profession is still quite new in China compared to the education and the profession development in the United States. So we only have about 30 or 40 years experiences in terms of this profession. So the China Council on Social Work Education, they have some recommendations on curriculum, but they do not have a kind of a policy force each school they have to kind of take certain curriculum courses or not. And so to some extent, it gives school a lot of flexibilities in terms of what kind of courses and what kind of curriculum plan they see fits students' needs. And one unique development in China last several years we have is that we work with a group of universities together. And these universities mainly focus on finance and economics. So their major background is about finance and academics. They have a lot of departments on economics, accounting, financial investment. But at the same time, they also have Department of Social Work. So all of these social work educational programs within these universities, they work very hard trying to find a common ground between social work and a lot of financial department they have. So FCAB really provides a unique perspective for them to combine the university's advantages in the field. So they can work both with other departments and work with other department students together to promote FCAB in social work education.
Okay, yeah, maybe I can add two things very quickly. I think that's a key observation. They already have systems in place, their courses, and so it's much harder to say, well, we want to introduce additional courses. The difference in the case of Sub-Saharan Africa is most of these programs are macro programs. There are some social entrepreneurship pieces, social economic development components of their courses. So there are elements of FCAB already covered, not in a structured way as we're talking about here. And so that gives us a leg up. One thing we've tried to do is show them how this could end up, almost like the end game, right? And so we have the benefit of this working in the US and Asia. And so, for instance, we've shared Margaret's book with them to see, a tangible product that could come out of this engagement. And they've been very excited about that. The other thing is also allow for flexibility. So we've told them, well, we can start with some basics, like just introducing a few courses, a few topics into your existing courses, all the way to having standalone courses or even certificate programs. And so that flexibility seems to work for them. And that's how we'll be proceeding.
Thank you both. I see Gina there. I don't know if we have time for a question, or where are we in terms of the timing?
Well, you're in the 5-minute break time now.
Okay.
So is there another question that you'd like to have them respond?
Well, I just see a good question from Lee there. Hi, Lee. She's just asking about COVID-19 implications. If you can speak real briefly on that, and then we'll get to break.
I see that quite some colleagues in China, they really trying to integrate FCAB idea into the work after the COVID, because COVID generates a lot of financial insecurity among low-income population, and FCAB can address that kind of challenge in the future. I see some opportunities from this pandemic in terms of further FCAB development.
So in the case of Sub-Saharan Africa, it's almost like a silver lining. It's sort of amplified the challenges, the vulnerabilities that people have. And so when we talk about this with people, people see the connection. Oh yeah, we have all these challenges. And now with COVID, it's even worse. And so there's no better time to do this than now. So that helps. We, in terms of engagement, actual engagement, we are still at the phase of stakeholder engagement. So we haven't really traveled to the ground. Most of our engagement has been through Zoom. It's worked well. We've had meetings at odd hours, but so far it's been good with a few challenges here and there.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you guys for your time and giving us a lot to reflect on. I'll pass it back over to Gina.